Hello and welcome to part 4. In this part we're going to share some green screening tips. We're then going to remove the green background from our animation using Hitfilm, and then we're going to make some shiny things a little shinier. From this point on, most of the animation is done against a green screen. Nice and stealthy. Moron. Let's have a look at some things that you can do when green screening, or any other colour screening for that matter, to get a better result. One of the major factors is controlling the light that hits the screen, so it's always best to light your screen separately to the figures or whatever it is you're shooting. I've tried to take a picture of my lighting setup but failed miserably, so here's an image from the web that shows the same principle. You want to ensure that your screen is evenly lit, no bright spots, no dark spots, no shadows, and try to avoid any creases. Avoid using objects or figures that have the same or similar colour to the screen that you're using as the background. So this might seem blooming obvious, but I once animated for 3 or 4 hours with a figure of this fella here, only later to notice the colour of his visor. Go! By moving the figures away from the screen, you can minimise the green that reflects onto the figure, called spill, and that's certainly a very bad thing when you have very reflective figures like the Silver Surfer here. Also, by moving the figures, you prevent them from casting a shadow on the screen. And finally, make sure anything you're shooting in front of your screen is in focus. It's very difficult to get a good key on blurred objects. If your camera has a deep depth of field, then use that, but as I'm using a C920 webcam, which has a very shallow depth of field, some scenes I have to animate the figures separately. If needed, you can always blur the object in the edit. So hopefully those will help you get a better result, and once you have your green screened content, it's time to remove the background. So here we are back in Hitfilm. I've already created a composite shot called Main, and in it I've loaded the background with the flaming torches, and I've also, if I change the visibility, loaded up the green screen animation. Nice and stealth. So I'm going to come up here into effects and I'm going to search for green screen. Now Hitfilm does supply probably a better key-in solution called Chroma Key, which is in the Pro version, but for simplicity's sake I'm going to use the green screen key. So I drag that onto my animation and it's already done some of the keying. Now the green screen key is a preset and it actually includes 3 different functions: colour difference key, matte cleaner and spill removal. Spill removal does exactly that. If you have a green edge, it will, if you're using a green screen, it will remove that for you. I tend to just add this and then leave it. We'll come back to matte cleaner in a moment and we'll go on to the colour difference key. So I can cover gamma very quickly. No idea what it does and I never touch it. View matte is very useful. So if I turn on view matte, by some witchcraft, Hitfilm knows what we're considering as the background, the bit to key out, and the foreground, the bits we want to keep. And view matte shows this in a silhouette form. The black is the bits it's going to remove, and the white is the bits it's going to keep. And we want that white to look as much like our figures as we can. So this is quite a good key already. I can see it's already a good key. I did consider doing a video on how to recover a bad key, so if anybody's interested in that, please let me know and I will do it. But I will go over some of these parameters that we have to see how they can be used. So I'll turn off view matte just for now. We have this min value, so I'll turn it back on again. So I talked about this black background, so the min is how much of that background we're going to be taken away. So if I simulate a slightly badder key and take this down, we'll introduce some background artifacts, which sometimes you do see in a bad key. So if you do have those, then turn on your view matte, start ramping up the min value until you get rid of those black backgrounds. So they've already gone here, so I'm happy with that. Now, as you remove stuff from the background, Hitfilm might start beginning at things in the foreground, so our figures also needs to be removed. So if it does that, you can reduce the max, and that will put things back into your foreground figures. Now I hope that makes sense. As I say, if people want more information, I'll do a separate video on that. So far we've got our key. We've got like a dark line around it, so maybe I had my figures still a bit too close to the screen. So I'm going to use the matte cleaner. Now again, it has this same view matte again, and it has three other options. It has smooth. Now if I have jaggeds around my jagged edges or jaggies around my figures, I can increase this to turn those jagged edges smooth. So of course, if I go too far up, it starts smoothing everything. So I'm going to take that down to about 4, and we would get a smoother edge around the outside. Now feather will take away a pixel, or will blur the outer pixels with the background. So again, if I turn that up, we see things slowly being taken away and blurred with the background. So I'm going to put that to 3. And choke does a very similar thing, but rather than blurring the edges, it just takes those pixels away. So again, if I turn that right the way up, you see the figures disappearing. It eats into the figures. And I'm going to set that to about 3 as well. Now a lot of this is playing around, getting to see what looks best. But for me, if I turn that view matte on, I'm happy with the key. So that's the green screen removed. When we were looking at the torches, we talked about having the torches interact with the environment. And in the same way, I would like the torches to impact on our figures as well. So to do that, I'm going to use the light wrap effect, and I'm going to put that onto my animated figures, onto my green screen animation. Excuse me. So at the moment it's done nothing because it has to have something to work with. So I'm going to create a new composite shot, and all I'm going to put in here is an orange plane, and onto that orange plane I'm going to apply the flicker effect. So when I play that, we just have a flickering orange box. I'll come back to main, and now I will drag that. Let's actually rename it. It's good practice to actually name things. I'm terrible at it. Let's call it orange flicker, and then I will drag that into our timeline, and I can even turn it off. So when I come onto our animation, I go into the light wrap and expand it. It's asking me for a source layer, and what it's going to do, it's going to take the colors from that source layer and apply it to the edges of our figures. So I want to select orange flicker, and you'll see we've got a bit of an orange glow around the outside here, which is what we wanted. If I ramp it all the way up, you'll see what it's doing. So that's too much. Let's go down to something like that. Even that may be too much. Again, this is all playing around. And when I play the video, nice and stealthy, we can see it's got this orange flicker around it. So let's get a closer look. You see here it's got an orange flicker, as if the torches are lighting up the figure with its flickering light. So the last thing that sometimes I try, let's reframe that to get everything into the screen and go to a point where we've got our figures in. I sometimes like to use the diffuse effect. So I'll add that to our walking, onto our animation, and if I ramp that up again, what this is doing is just softening the edges. So again, too much, it softens the edges of our animation. I'm going to put that to around about 5, and this just helps blend it into the background a little bit more. So that's everything I've wanted to do on the figures. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the blur effect and I'm going to add that to the background. Now it's blurred a little too much, so I'm going to reduce that down to 5, maybe 3. Let's go back to 5. And there we have it. We have our keyed figures,
nice and stealthy,
affected by the background, and looking quite good. Again, there's so much you can play around with here, but for a very quick guide through, I think that's it for now.
We need to stay alert and ready for any... Oh, look, shiny things.
So the last thing we're going to look at in this part are the shiny things. In one chest we have some fool's gold or iron pyrites, and in the other some small gems that I found in a craft shop. Let's see how we made them even shinier. So here they are. They're already looking quite pretty, but I want them to be shinier. Now if I was to do anything on this image that I've loaded into a composite shot, the whole image would be affected. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that image, and then I'm going to use the freehand mask tool to just create a mask around our pot of gold. And what that's done is it's cut a piece of this layer out and left the other layer as it is. Now I'll create another mask exactly the same way around our jewels and gems, and it will become obvious what I've done in just a moment. So we have 2 copies of exactly the same image, but in one of them I've just cut a piece out. So if I go to the glow effect and I drag that glow just on one of the images, you'll see that it just glows here. So maybe if I turn it up just a bit. So let's create the intent. Yeah, so it's just made that piece that I cut out glow. Now when we did the torches, if you remember about feathered masks, it's still got quite a hard edge. Let's ramp it right the way up for now. So what I want to do is go into both of those masks, go into the shape, and I just want to feather them. So it's just going to blur them a little bit, blur the edges, and not make them look as hard. I'll do it on the other side as well. So we've made them look a little bit shinier. We do also want like a light flare over here. So that's exactly what I'll do. I'll search for light flares. I'll add it just to this top one, and we have ourselves quite a bright light flare there. What I will do is I will change the hot spot position, and I will move it down over into this area where the blue jewel is. And in the hotspot parameters, I'm going to take the brightness down just a little bit. There you go. To something like that. So they're brighter, we have a light flare, and of course, because we want it to blend into the background, I'm going to add the flicker effect to that layer. So if I play this, we now have our flickering gems. Maybe a bit too much. Let's see if I go to flicker and just change the frequency and just turn it down a little bit. Does that make it quicker or slower? Makes it a bit quicker, I think. Let's do it like that. What's that do? Okay, somewhere in between the two. Again, with all these effects, there's a lot of playing to do, but I think you get the idea. So we've made our shiny things shinier. So that's it for this part. In the next part, our heroes prepare for Zarkon to arrive. Thanks for watching.